Hey everyone, welcome to Classics You Slept Through, the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who always gets her wordle by the third guess, my sister, Meredith. How's it going, Mer?
I don't know anything about Wordle.
You don't know anything about Wordle?
Nothing.
Do you know what Mastermind is?
No.
What? You don't know what Mastermind is?
No.
The game where you guess the code? The
No.
four colors? What?
What?
Yes,
Is it like a Gen X thing? Is it like a Gen
Oh my
Xer
goodness,
thing?
no. It's like from the 1950s, probably, or older.
Oh, a boomer thing?
Yeah. So no, Wordle is just mastermind for words. You guess a 5-letter word. It tells you how many letters you got right, and if they're in the right position, and you make guesses till you figure your word out.
You know, my uncle-in-law, so my father-in-law's brother, has made up his own game, word game, which I find extremely fun. Um, it's called, oh no. It's called,
Must be a great game.
oh no. No, it is. It is Steplets. It's called Steplets. And there's a main word. There's steps of words, and each one is a little bit longer, and each one incorporates the letter from the one above, and you have to guess them all. And then there's like a bonus word or something like that. And he makes them up, and we get them every day in our email.
He
And
should code it, put it on the web, and then in a month or two, once it goes viral, he can sell it to the New York Times for 7 figures.
that's where he wants it. He wants it in the New York Times.
Well, then he needs to get it on the web and get people talking about it and get people playing
How,
it.
how do you do that? I
You
don't
you have to code it.
Isn't he
Anyway,
an NFT?
oh my goodness. Okay, well,
Anyway, I'm good.
you're good. Okay, excellent. All right, very good. Well, I'm also feeling good because we have reached the end of this arduously long journey. We had many hiatuses along the way, a lot of long breaks here on the pod. But it's a new year, 2022, and we are up and running, and we have finished Three Men in a Boat, finally, which we started back. Do you even know when we started this?
No, I feel like we are in them with them in the boat. We went on this long
We did.
this long
Just out of
journey.
curiosity, let me see. Our first episode for Three Men in a
no.
Boat was released August 4th of last year.
Wow.
That is wild. August, September, October, November, December, six months.
Months.
That's like a third of the podcast's length,
Oh my
or maybe or even half we've spent on this single book. So if
Well, there was you moved. No, you got
we
got
got
all
our
your
stuff, we got our
stuff.
stuff.
There was surgery involved. I had surgery.
There was
There was
Christmas,
the
Thanksgiving,
holidays.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Hanukkah. There was a lot.
Well, if you're out there, regular listeners, we appreciate you hanging through 6 months of layoff on the pod, and I promise our next book, which we will. Did we already reveal our next? We didn't reveal the book on the pod
I
yet.
don't think we revealed
Yeah.
it.
Well,
No.
our next book, I promise, will not take 6 months to get through.
It's
It's
short.
short, it's fun, but why don't you wait till the end of the pod to hear that? But before you do, while you're waiting, why don't you go over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. Or now, if you're listening on Spotify, you can also give us a star rating on Spotify. Both of those things will help people find the show. So if you like what we're doing, if you like old books, if you like hearing old books read to you, if you like talking about old books, well, get some friends to listen to them with you, and then you can talk about old books with your friends or with us. But anyway, today, the old book we are talking about is this Three Men in a Boat, to Say Nothing of the Dog by Jerome K. Jerome. And let's start off, let's just talk, the characters of this thing first. So we had 3 primary protagonists, as well as the dog, who, though he's in the title, doesn't really figure into this story very much. He's just sort
He
of
has
there.
strong opinions from time to time.
And there was a few stories about him, but otherwise he just sort of was in the boat with.
It also
our
took a
3
chapter or
men.
two to figure out he was actually a dog.
Well, I did, yeah. I had no.
Me
it was not-
too.
it was not clear to me he was a dog in the beginning. But we have our three men. We have Jerome, referred to as Jay throughout the book, so our author is also our narrator. And then his two friends, George and Harris. And what can we say about these three guys? Do they stand out to you at all after going on this journey down the Thames with them?
Well, George bought a banjo.
He did.
He played it at the end finally. Harris drinks a lot. So
Yeah, I was gonna say Harris was the guy who
cheers
drinks,
to
right?
Harris.
That's about the only thing I could tell you about Harris.
He says he fought like 32 swans or something because he drank too much. Whatever that was. I like Harris.
I kind of categorize them as Harris seems more the disagreeable one, and George is sort of the lazy kind of there one.
They're all pretty lazy. I mean, even Jerome, he loves work. He collects it. We've said that a few times. He's like, I have no lack of work. I love to collect it. He just never does any of it.
They definitely extol the virtues of their sloth. That is certainly for sure. George is the only one among them. Yeah, George is the only one among them who has a job, actually, even though they make fun of him for not actually working.
He's the one who works at the bank?
Yes, George is. He has the job at the bank. Did you get any sort of sense of these guys as far as, like, were they... I mean, I would think these three young gentlemen who don't seem to have any, employment, that they'd be men of wealth, but I don't think that Jerome was, the author himself, I don't think he was a well-to-do guy.
Mm-mm. No, well, I mean, this book was successful.
This is meal ticket.
Like popular pop culture success, not critical success. The critics hated it. And they said he was like catering to the lower classes with all his funny quips and asides. But it ended up being really popular and like sparking a high level of travel down the Thames. People wanted to recreate this trip that they took. And there's still people who do it today. Like, you've got the people who do like the Jane Austen reenactments and they dress up for Jane Austen conventions. There are people who still recreate this trip down the Thames to honor this book, or, it's a little cult classic. And I mentioned this to you earlier, I read that all the pubs that they stop at are still in operation.
Which is absolutely wild. I can't imagine.
That was crazy.
100 some years later that many places would still be, our country is barely 250 or so years old. And
that's the coolest thing about travel. I mean, you've lived in ancient places, but like just traveling to Scotland, they're like, and this was built in the 1100s. I'm like, what now?
Still here. It's fine. Yeah.
I'm like, 1770, whatever. My town was founded in 1608.
Right. If a building is 50 years old, we're like, it's an old building. Wow. Anyway. So yeah, honestly, through the book, these guys aren't really fully formed characters. They're just sort of names attached to these stories.
Yeah.
I didn't really ever get a sense of them.
I think loosely based on his friends. Like Jerome did this with his fiance, I read. Yeah. Like he didn't necessarily do it with his three friends. But he took a trip like this and based it on people that he knew. But yeah, they're not, I couldn't tell you anything about their, like the deeper inner mind. Like when we read Northanger Abbey, we got her thoughts.
Sure.
All the time.
Right, all the characters.
And even and her thoughts about other characters and her analysis of them. We don't get that.
No, certainly not. They all just sort of bust each other's balls a lot. Like a bunch of dudes hanging in a boat. They make fun of each other and try to get out of work and think the others are lazy. And yeah, they're just sort of like young guys just kind of hanging out.
Do you connect with that at all?
Do I? No.
I mean, really. At some point, maybe not now, but at some point in your life, were you ever a young man hanging out with the boys?
Maybe high school, maybe, junior, senior year. That'd be probably about it. I
Oh
guess
yeah,
a
you
little
joined
bit,
the
maybe
army
a little
really
bit in
early.
college, maybe a little bit in college, but yeah, like for the most, I mean, once I was out of college, it's like I'm just gonna go home and at the end of work, I don't want to do anything. I didn't hang out with people. I still don't
No,
hang out with people.
no trips, no like guys trip.
The closest would be my senior year when I was between junior and senior year when I went down and we did sort of an internship in the army for a month. A bunch of us went down to Fort Hood, Texas.
That is not a guy's
And
trip.
well,
That's
no,
internship in the army.
well, no, but then on the weekends, we would rent a car and we would go down to Austin or go down to San Antonio or Dallas or whatever. We'd get out. They put us in these. We lived in these old World War II barracks, so they were just open bay style with bunk beds. So there's like 30 guys in a bay, and so on the weekends you're like, there's nothing to do. Let's get out of here. So we'd go places. Yeah, that
What
was
did
about
you
the
like? Go
closest
listen
thing.
to music?
Yeah, we went down to we drive down to Austin, see some live music, go to clubs on the weekends. We went down to I think we went to San Antonio one weekend.
I can't picture you going to a club. I just can't.
I went to Dallas. Went to Dallas. So normally I was a designated driver, so I slept in the parking lot in the car, and then they would just
Well, everyone else was in the club.
right, and they would just knock on the door, and I would drive them home. That was
What were the
normally what I
what were
did.
the can't even what were like the fat beats they were dropping at the club in the late 90s when you were
Yeah, seriously. Oh, we went to a CD release party for a friend of mine had this band he liked. It was a local Austin band, Chomsky, and they were doing
that
a
was the name of the
that
band?
was the name of the band,
That's
and
the
they were doing
dorkiest band name ever.
yeah, they were doing a CD release
I
party,
like
and it
it.
was them and two other bands that were there, and I ended up really enjoying the second band that played, and I bought their CD, and no, there's no information on the web. There's just some local Austin band that disappeared probably a few years later.
Oh
But
man.
I know they were there. I thought they were quite Crash Vinyl was their name. They were good. I
That's a
liked
cool
them.
band name.
I liked them. They were good. The CD was good. I did not dig the band we were there to see. I didn't dig so much, and even my buddy was a little disappointed with the performance. But I thought it
Who
was
was
kind of
friends with the
boring.
band?
He wasn't friends with the band, but he had
Oh.
seen them before, and he was a fan of some local Austin band. Yeah.
Well, if you're a member or a former member of Crash Vinyl and you happen to listen to this
Boy
podcast,
Wonder.
send us an
That was
email.
the song. That was the song that did it to me. So if anybody,
Boy
any,
Wonder.
any Crash Vinyl fans out there, that was my jam back in like the summer of '99, I guess.
Wow, 99.
Yeah, seriously. Okay. Anyway, so let's get back to 3 Men in a Boat. We've had our little vignette here. Let's talk about the structure of this book. So we've mentioned there's not much of a narrative arc to this book. So the story, in a nutshell, is Jerome and his two buddies decide, hey, let's get out of the house. Let's go take a trip down the Thames, and just because that's what people did back then. And so they said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go camping and boating and whatnot. And so they do. And so that's the framing story for really all of these little humorous vignettes that our author drops in. So the story is he weaves in and out of, especially in the early chapters, just sort of, yeah, we boated for a few days. The story gets short shrift, maybe a paragraph. But he goes off on these tangents of these either humorous stories or travelogue descriptions of the towns they're visiting, or there's a very strange, and he even sort of alludes to it as we're putting this in here for educational purposes, sort of cynically and intentionally. He does maybe 2 chapters of sort of long British historical fiction of him imagining, oh, these places along the Thames that were integral to British history. Here's what it might have looked like when they signed the Magna Carta and whatnot, and sort of goes into that. So how did you
Well,
like the structure of the book?
I I like the structure in that I enjoyed the vignettes. It was almost like the travelogue part I could skip.
Right.
Um, Now I believe it would probably be much more interesting if I had any level of familiarity with the things that he was talking about. Like if I read a travelogue of, boating down the Schuylkill or something. And I don't know if anyone has ever, if you've ever boated down the Schuylkill, send us an email. But if I knew places where he stopped, so I can imagine at the time, of course, people found this interesting, but it's the asides and the vignettes that seem timeless, seriously very timeless. Like that's what I noticed right away when we read what is it, I think it was chapter 1. Let me pull up my notes here, but yeah, chapter 1, when he's talking about all the ailments that he has, and he felt like he had hay fever, so he went to the museum uh, to look it up, and he got down the book and he started to read, and all of a sudden he has all of the diseases. He
Right.
has everything except housemaid's knee, and he feels slighted. He felt hurt. It seemed somehow to be a slight. Why hadn't I gotten housemaid's knee? But it made me think of, like, you Google red bump on skin, and it's
Right.
like, you're dead. You
Exactly.
are
Yeah.
actively dying.
Yeah,
It's
that
like,
was sort of the first vignette in the book and kind of hooked me. I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
agree. The funny vignettes were terrific. The historical fiction just felt bizarre and out of place.
Hmm.
Which, the fact that he acknowledged that it was going to be in there for educational purposes, I don't think makes it okay. It's sort of, it's like in movies nowadays where they are self-referential, then they make a joke about being self-referential, so it makes that
Hmm.
okay. It's like, well, no, it's just lazy writing. So I don't know. I wasn't digging on those. And then, yeah, as you said, the travelogue portions. I mean, great. You can go to the ale house and at whatever Dunbury Lock or whatever and have great, pork and pie or whatever British people eat. Um, so there was, I guess, that portion of it. But again, as a modern reader, yeah, I kind of glazed over. I guess it was sort of interesting, but I don't know
Well,
these towns. I'm not going to visit them.
I read that was one of the critiques as well, is that it felt very disjointed, and even the voice and the tone with which he wrote certain the whole thing, it just
Sure.
changed, and critics were like, they didn't like it, they were critical of it, but the thought was, well, some of this he's writing while he's doing a trip and at different times, and he's taking notes, and that translated into the seemingly disjointed tone
Yeah.
of the book. I don't know if I felt the same level of, oh, this feels disjointed. I felt like, oh, he has a purpose. He wants to give us travelogue thing. He's also telling us this funny thing to make it interesting. And I don't think it there was no discernible upon a first reading structure where he went vignette, travelogue, uh, uh, you know, not analysis, but he has these beautiful poetic parts too, which I really enjoyed and were some of my favorites. Like the funny stuff was funny, cool. Travelogue, I could skip it, but then he has these moments of really beautiful prose talking about the night sky and what it was like to be under the stars, and that is the stuff that I really connected with.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if it was like parts of his journal where he's like,
Yeah.
oh, this
Probably.
fits here with this, and oh, this is where we were when I thought that. um and there wasn't, like I said, there wasn't a discernible pattern that you could fall into to find those. But I don't know, I didn't necessarily mind it either.
I think you could definitely feel it because he's very, when he's talking about him and his friends or when he goes off onto a funny segue, he is very flip and very, just very cheeky, and
Yeah.
nothing really is what he means. He's saying the opposite for humorous effect, sort of thing. And then when he gets to the travelogue portions, it's just sort of straight travelogue. Like, he's not being flip or funny about the towns he's visiting for the most part. He's just saying, well, this town has this, and this is, occasionally he will say, like the romantics, when he was saying about the one town, like, oh, this is the kind of town that girls want to get lost in, and the hero of a story would never visit this kind of town, sort of thing, where he's sort of making fun of other books. But for the most part, he plays it straight. And then, when he gets to the portion, just the very odd, the dead woman in the river, towards the end of the book, which is very strange.
That one was really weird.
Yeah, that definitely was totally different.
The book was either straightforward travelogue, lighthearted, humorous vignette, or musings on nature, which kind of went in with the travelogue. Like,
right.
Here we are, we're parked under the stars, whatever. Then all of a sudden, a dead woman comes floating by, and the story about how she didn't have any money, and the man left her, and her family shunned her for being pregnant out of wedlock. So she gave her kid some chocolate, and then got on a train with the last bit of money she had, and then threw herself in the river. And I was like, man.
Yeah, it was a little heavy. I mean, even when they find the dead dog in the river, it's sort of played for laughs, because he says, oh, well, we didn't want any tea that day, or whatever, so even that is sort of not as heavy.
Didn't they drink the tea first? At least one of them did, just a little bit.
Right, and then they saw the dog, and they're like, okay, well, we don't want any tea anyway. Right. Definitely, I thought, too, the book, I don't know, I kind of felt like he ran out of steam, because in the beginning, he was very heavy on the vignettes and the funniness, and then as it progressed to the later chapters, those were fewer, and it was more travelogue, and it just felt like he was, well, I've told all these funny stories, now I better just talk about the locks and the towns and the inns and that sort of thing.
I wonder if it's like you start an exciting road trip or vacation, and you're into it, and you've got all this like energy pointed in that direction, and then it's like all fun and games until you find a dead chick in the river.
Right.
and considering that he perhaps wrote this based on a trip that he took, or a few trips that he took, I wonder if there was a part of him at some point towards the end where he's like looking at what he's written, and he's like, this is nothing. I don't know. That might be dramatic, but like, this trip affected me. There are dead animals in the river. There's trash in the river. People throw themselves into the river. How can I just write about funny Uncle Podger?
Right. Yeah.
True. And tell them where the best pub is. I don't know. It seemingly was thrown in there. Although I also read that at the time it was popular to add some sort of commentary on society and critique society in some way. And so he's throwing in there this lower class story of a woman who was shunned, and he has like this moral this moral saying in there. It's like, but who of us hasn't sinned in some way? Like, he tries to make it sort of funny and lighthearted, and it's like, well, thank goodness none of us are sinners.
Right.
And it's like, oh,
it's like a very special episode of Family Ties, it's all fun and games until you get to that one episode, and then you're like, okay, well, it's the serious one now. We're good. Were there any of the vignettes or any of the stories that really stuck with you, that you remember sort of vividly?
I think I really enjoyed, well, I guess it's not really a vignette. It's them traveling. So the one I'm referring to is when Hare stays back, and he says he's gonna like clean the boat or straighten up or whatever,
Right.
and he really just drinks all of the whiskey, and says that they try to wake him up to come get them, and he can't wake up, and then finally they hear Montmorency barking, and he's like, I had to fight off all these swans. There were like 2 swans, and they're like, how many swans? Well, there were 12 swans. How many swans? There were 32 swans or something that he had to fight off. And then in the morning he's like, swans,
what are you talking about?
What?
Swans?
So I enjoyed that one, but I don't know, the vignette of Uncle Podger just sticks out a lot, because I feel like I'm a little bit of an Uncle Podger, where I don't do things necessarily right. I'm just gonna like take a screw and a high heel, and I'm gonna bang it into the wall and then hang my picture. I'm not gonna go get the right tools. I don't have time for that.
And if you don't remember, the story of Uncle Podger, listeners, was the guy wanting to hang the picture and talking about how hard he worked, and really it was just him standing there barking orders at people to do it, and they all did it wrong, and it took forever to get this picture hung. It took all night.
He put holes in the wall, and dropped everything, and blamed everyone else. Yeah. No, I'm not Uncle Podger, but I feel like I'm on my way.
Yeah.
Which one stuck out to you?
You know, it's weird. It wasn't really much of a story, but when I was writing down the outline for the episode today, I was like, okay, so what stories stuck out? The very first one that popped into my head was Mrs. Thomas's tomb.
Oh.
So they were on the river, and I don't remember if it was Harris or George. Probably, I think it might have been Harris. I don't know. But he had just heard that you gotta go see Mrs. Thompson's tomb. So to me, it was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, that it was sort of a thing that you stop at these churchyards and look at these ornate tombs, and that there's sort of known ones that are like these famous tombs that you go look at. Two, I guess that they did these ornate tombs. I mean, I guess we still do. You know, you and I recently went to a funeral, and there were some big, there's some big tombs in the graveyard. So, which personally, I think is kind of a waste of land. Just sprinkle me under a tree, I'm good. But anyway,
waste of land, money, resources.
Right? Anyway. Yeah. I'm getting me onto a vignette, but I always mention to Susan, like, when we see graveyards, I'm like, okay, this person died in 1812. Like, literally no one who ever knew this person is still alive. Who is visiting this grave? Right? Like, this person's grandchildren's grandchildren are probably dead. Like, why is this grave from 1812 still up? Anyway, as to my own personal thing with graveyards and land use and whatever. But then Mrs. Thomas's tomb, they get there, and it's just sort of like, okay, it's cool, whatever. And personally, I am a huge fan of like Americana and sideshow or highway attractions that when you get there are just kind of like, okay, whatever.
You're a huge fan of meh attractions.
Yes, like the more hyped up. So, obviously here on the East Coast we have south of the border. I've never actually been to it. I've driven by it a bunch of times. But when I did my cross-country trip 2 years ago, and I went out to, I went through South Dakota, I stopped at Wall Drug, which is
Wall Drug.
It's basically south of the border, right? Like, you see signs on the highway for miles and miles, like world famous Wall Drug, ice cold water, Wall Drug, whatever. And it's in Wall, South Dakota. And so you get there, and it's okay.
The drugstore?
I mean, it's a little bit of a played up tourist attraction. They have
really big
memorabilia
Wawa.
and souvenirs. But they have like a jackalope statue you can sit on. They've got a couple of. There's supposed to be like a. There was supposed to be like a Tyrannosaurus. Wasn't there, but whatever. It's like, okay, great, whatever. It was not something you would actually want to stop at, but.
Dude, on the way.
Pretty awesome.
To North Carolina. Remember when we came to North Carolina to see you? When you guys lived in in Jordan, and then you were like, "Look, we're coming back to the States. We're gonna
Oh,
pull
yeah,
up
yeah,
in North Carolina.
yeah. When
Come visit."
we got the Airbnb in Boone,
Yeah.
yeah.
On the way there, Ben and I stopped at Foam Henge.
Oh, mom and dad have
It
been there.
was amazing.
I want to go. Yeah.
It was great. And a closed attraction close by was Civil War soldiers versus dinosaurs.
Oh,
It was a giant
wow.
sculpt, but there had been a storm and it was damaged or whatever, so we couldn't go see it. But we really wanted to see the Civil War soldiers versus the dinosaurs, and you could kind of see it over the fence,
Yeah.
but you couldn't actually go in. But
Nice.
Foamhenge,
Nice.
it's the only like sideshow, or not sideshow, the only roadside attraction that I've ever actually seen, I think.
Do you know what the one that is my huge regret
I don't.
is?
What is it?
Roadside America on 78. It's closed now. It's permanently closed and sold and whatever. It's gone to, gone to the dogs. But I would drive past it going up and back to school on 78 all the time, and I was always like, I should stop. I gotta stop at Roadside America, and I never did. And so now every time I drive 78 out your way, and I see, for sale, the closed Roadside America, I'm like,
You missed your chance.
I missed my chance to go to see Roadside America.
I've never even heard of that. 78?
Yeah, it's so it was apparently this guy. It's basically a huge, or it was, not anymore. There's still pictures online. You can see it. But it was this. It's basically a big model or miniature train set of like America, but it's like America of like the 1940s or 50s. It's like the guy that owned it. It's like basically the America of his youth, as he remembered
Just looked
it.
it up.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Roadside. So
Yeah,
it's a giant miniature village.
basically, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
Oh
closed
my
now.
God.
It's no longer. It is no more. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
Greatest miniature village.
Yeah,
This is crazy. No wonder you're disappointed.
I know. I wish I'd gone. I just never went. So anyway, my point is, whenever there is something on the highway like that, stop and see it. Like take 30 minutes out of your trip. Whatever you're driving to can wait. Don't miss your chance to go see whatever chintzy side show there is. You should go see it.
And I just want to say it was in Charlottesville,
Charlottesville,
Pennsylvania.
Yes. Fantastic.
Charlottesville.
Yes.
Come on,
We got the
Pennsylvania.
best names. Yeah, Pennsylvania's got
Better
some
than
good
that.
names once you get off the highway.
Charlottesville. Sounds like an elementary school bully. Like, where are you from? Charlottesville. Sorry, all you Charlottesville CYST pod frequenters,
Yeah.
patrons.
we don't have a Patreon. Come on. All right, we can barely get regular episodes out. I think we get bonus episodes out. All right, so last thing to kind of talk about is, so this book centers on sort of boating culture on the Thames, and I found it kind of interesting, and I sort of broke it up into a few different things that I learned about boating on the Thames. First, we learned about the different styles of boats that there were, and sort of how
Did
you do this thing, this popular recreational activity of boating, and either just doing a day trip and boating and picnicking and whatnot, or like these guys did in the book, the longer overnight camping trip. So they are in, I don't actually know what the boat would be called, but it's a boat that you tow, and yet someone also steers while you're in the water. So there's people on the ground on the side of the river on the tow path with a cable or a rope walking and pulling the boat along. But it also has a sail they could put up. So if the wind was up, they had a mast and a sail that they also could raise.
I feel like it defeats the purpose to go on a boating adventure if you have to drag the boat behind you.
It
on a
does seem a little
towpath.
counterproductive. But, and they talk about the different mishaps you get into when lines get tangled or people are passing. Like, it just seems a difficult
Yeah.
thing to operate and maneuver.
I mean, were they like, I'm thinking C&O Canal,
Yeah, like a towpath. Yeah.
like I used dad used to bike the towpath. I used to walk along the towpath.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
The river didn't go there. Like the lock and canal system, like the towpath was different than when it had been in like heavy
Sure.
use. But
Right.
like
Yeah. You would have
you
walked
could
it
just
and
row.
pulled it, and yeah, I don't know.
I mean, why can't you row?
Right.
Any boaters out there? Why can't you just
I
row?
don't know. Then they also had punts, which apparently were boats
This,
you propelled by poles, right?
right.
Like you think of the gondola in Venice. And then the dreaded steam launches. You know, actually
Mm-hmm.
the steam. You know, we're into the age of steam, the late 1800s. So they actually had the steam powered boats. So, which we alternatively liked and disliked throughout the book, depending on what humor effect he was going for in said chapter. Then we get into there was locks. So, you know, the lock on the river changes you enter the lock. They raise or lower the water level in the lock so that you can continue on your journey. But apparently these are sort of waypoints along the river that are
Locks.
right, that are the known markers for where you are on the river.
Hmm.
There are towns there, so I guess maybe you reach the lock and that's, well, we'll stop here for the night. We'll get to such and such lock and then go into the riverside inns, which, as you sort of mentioned earlier, sort of the inn culture. So
Yeah.
they either slept out or and cooked their own meals, you know, sort of, you know, backcountry backpacking camping style, or they would stop at a river town and come in, you know, park the boat for the night, go in, stay at the inn, have a meal, kind of wash up.
What I thought was interesting was they have like I don't remember like the boning or the
Yeah,
awning
right.
like skeleton that
For at
they
night.
could sleep on the boat as long as they put that up, and they had immense trouble with it.
And it wasn't raining,
Uh,
you know. Or that was, they
yeah,
put up for rain, because on a nice night they could just sleep out, I guess.
and it makes it sound like the boat is huge, but it's not that big, so they're just like sleeping in the bottom of it, which
Yeah, I
sounds
think they're just,
terribly
yeah, they're just
uncomfortable.
sort of
Terribly.
in there laying it alongside each other. Then we always also hear about, you know, not only do they have the inns, but there's also people will just rent you a room. You know, we had the long vignette of them searching for hours upon hours for a hotel that was open and had room, and they end up just kind of crashing in somebody's bed for a couple of bucks that night or whatever.
I guess it's old school Airbnb. I guess it's not that weird,
Right, exactly, yeah.
except you're not really. Although some Airbnbs are just like parts of people's houses, so they might be home.
Have you ever done one of those? Like just a
No,
room? Yeah, I've always
no.
rented the whole house. I've never done a
My
shared
introverted self
room.
would never allow me to do that. That'd be
The
too.
the closest, I guess maybe the closest I did is we rented a tiny house that was in someone's backyard.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, you can come in and use the kitchen or whatever you need." I mean, we didn't. We didn't go into the main house because they're home, but you know, they invited us in to just do, and we just like, we're good. We'll just stay in this little tiny house, and you know, they had a big yard in the back, and so we like sat in like folding chairs and kind of
There's
hung
like
out.
one or two Airbnbs in my hometown. I guess it's your hometown too, even though you
Yeah.
weren't born near there. But there's like one or two, and one of them is a big farmhouse that you can then go see the farm activities if you
Yeah.
want, but it's not used. They don't need it. So they
Oh,
rent it out as an Airbnb. And I told mom we should go do it Heritage Christmas is
there
this
you
year. We
go.
could go do like a big family thing and stay in someone's
Yeah.
Airbnb and watch them feed their llamas or whatever.
I isn't didn't we decide? Didn't we find out Old Home Week is this year?
Oh yes, that's what I meant. Oh, you were there for this
Yeah.
conversation.
Was I?
Old Home Week,
Yeah, Old Home Week
not
is this
Heritage
year,
Christmas. Heritage Christmas is over.
right? Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Being from a small
We're
town.
we're long past Christmas. We also had a lot of talk about girls on the river and sort of the men and women relations. That was interesting. So apparently girls like to get all dolled up and dressed up for these river adventures, but don't want to get dirty and don't want to do any work. And the men like to tease and flirt. So I guess
Makes me
this
think
is
of
an
like
easy way to get out and see girls.
those that blows my mind. College football, the way like Southern girls, like
Oh.
you get dolled up for a game.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
your
Virginia
grad
was
school.
wild. Like on football Saturdays at Virginia, people were dressed to the nines, man.
I don't get it.
I mean, I
Don't
wore
get
the
it.
same thing to a football game that I wore pretty much every day of the week. So we changed,
Yeah,
put a
but
different shirt on, but the pants were the same usually.
well, did guys get dressed up or just the girls?
No, the guys. I mean, Virginia guys would get they put little bow ties on and their little dress shirts and whatnot. They dress up a little bit.
I don't get it. I mean, I get the Kentucky Derby. It's like once a year, very fun, and do little hats, and it's a derby. Well,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but
and then in
football
Virginia,
happens
you're
all
sitting on the
time.
grass. The student section's like sitting on a grassy hill, so
What?
you're just so you're like. all right,
So
put your
chicks
nice
are all
clothes on.
dressed up and they look gorgeous and they're sitting in the grass.
Sitting on the grass. Yeah. I don't know. Why not?
I don't get college football. I can't watch. Now that I'm old, I'm like,
Well,
why?
there's lots of reasons
why?
I can't watch, but anyway,
Why am I watching these children play a game? Like I might as well go watch my
that
child
is
play a game.
yeah. And the coach is getting paid $3 million a year, and they're making tons of money
It's
from
terrible.
university. And anyway,
No offense to anyone, but
yeah,
I don't get it.
pay him
I just
anyway.
don't get it.
All right, and then we get into sort of the other kind of main theme I pulled out of the book is it's the book almost is a wistful reminiscence because there's a lot of older men on the river stories of how the river used to be. It's a lot of we get the fishing stories, a lot of old fishermen stories. Think about the story when they run into the old guys in the punt. It's almost like Jerome can feel, and maybe this is sort of his issue with steam launches in the beginning, can feel the world is changing. And so he wants to write this book and kind of freeze in amber this moment. What is the Thames like? What is boating culture on the Thames like? Because he sees these older guys who their world is already slipping away, and he wants to preserve at least a little bit these towns and this culture on the river.
I got that feeling, and that feeling maybe is one of the ones that is timeless. Every generation feels like the generation before is old news, but the generation ahead of them doesn't know what they're talking about. And it has been that way for as long as humans have had the ability to recognize such a thing. And it blows my mind when I see people my age, like my generation, talking about kids these days. I'm like, what the? No, we're the generation that doesn't do that. And
We're not supposed to anyway.
I remember watching a TED Talk a long time ago about language and linguistics and whatever language was, maybe it was Greek, whatever, but it was basically a record of them complaining about the way people were talking these days and how there was no punctuation and there was no adherence to the grammar and blah, blah, blah. And the TED Talk presenter, forgive me if I don't remember his name, he was like, so they're talking about what became French. And I was like, what?
Wow.
Like, to think that is true. And he was referencing like whatever is happening in modern text language is a language.
Yeah.
Because he was saying someone from 1970, if they were to time travel and walk down the dormitory halls,
no
and
idea
see,
what people are saying.
Yeah, and see what some kids wrote on their boards, all the shorthand and whatever, they would have no idea. And so it is now another,
especially if you read. So I've read some. Well, we read Princess of Mars, which was early 1900s. But if you read sci-fi, like some pulp sci-fi from the 40s or 50s, man, you no idea what these people are saying. Like
Really?
the slang and you're like, what on earth are they even talking about? It always sticks in my mind. Nice example in E. E. Smith's Chronicles of the Lensman series. They the one guy, I don't know why this line stuck with me, but he says, "No soap, chief." Like, like saying like, no way, it doesn't work. No soap, chief. It's like, wow, there's no soap there, chief. It's great.
You might have seen this, but I saw like a viral tweet that said, it said, Wordle is the sourdough starter of Omicron.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
It was like, go back to 2019 and ask your 2019 self to read that and make any sense of it.
What does this even mean? Exactly. All right.
But I still don't know what Wordle is. Anyway.
I told you at the beginning what it is. Anyway,
I know you
guess
did.
A word. Guess a word. It's mastermind. All right. So, yeah. Overall, I mentioned earlier, I felt the book kind of petered out. He ran out of stories. But
they threw a dead girl in there at the end.
They threw a dead girl at the end. Why not?
Were you not impressed? Are you not entertained?
You're entertained. So, 3 Men in a Boat, To Say Nothing the Dog by Jerome K. Jerome. What do you think? Did you fall asleep, or do we sleep through this one, or we stay awake?
I think I nodded out during the travel log portions and woke back up during the other portions.
Yeah. I think the first 7, 8 chapters were real solid and enjoyable and fun. And I think maybe that's why it took us forever to read this one.
I was just going to say that,
it sort of died out towards the end, and it's like this book has no momentum anymore.
Yeah. I remember thinking like, oh, we're going to read Princess of Mars. Like, this isn't my thing. He's giving me this pulp, whatever. It was compelling. Like, I read it, next chapter.
It just moved,
I was like, what time is it? Oh, man, I got to go to sleep. This was not that.
No, definitely not. Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think this is, I've nodded off. If the teacher calls on me, I think I can mumble out an answer, but for the most part, this one's putting me under, which I think is our first one that we have said that about. So we had a good track record at this point. We had to find one that kind of kills the momentum at some point, right?
Yeah, sorry about that. 6 months in one book. It's not very...
Seriously. Well, that brings us to our next book, which I promise will be better, more fun, more engaging, quicker, and I'm very excited about.
Tell me, President Xi, what is it?
So, our next book, you're going to get us banned in China. Our next book is going to be the original Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, which is brand new into the public domain here for 2022. Fresh, hot public domain action this year. Doesn't get any better than this. So for next episode, we will read up through chapter 5 of Winnie the Pooh. And we will get to meet Pooh and Christopher Robin and all the characters that you know and love. And, maybe we'll get into some public domain discussions about the difference between a public domain character and then a Walt Disney version of a public domain character, which are two separate entities. So the only thing which is in public domain is the single original Winnie the Pooh book. So we're not talking about, there's no public domain for any Disney properties because the mouse locks everything down. They will never probably be public domain Disney stuff. As well as later books are not in public domain yet. So the other books that A.A. Milne wrote, Now We Are 6 and When We Were 7 or something, or whatever the next one was. Those are not in public domain yet either. So just the original Winnie the Pooh we'll read through chapter 5 for next time.
Yeah. And as a side note, I don't suggest anyone Googles fresh, hot public domain action. I don't know what you're going to get.
That's what you'll find there. Seriously.
Don't.
Find some action in the public domain, perhaps. All right. So, here we are at the end. We mentioned, please rate and review us on Apple iTunes. Hit us up for a Spotify star rating. Like and subscribe us on YouTube. Search for us, Classics You Slept Through on YouTube. You can also follow us on all of our social medias at CYSTPod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and email. If you want to email us, send us your thoughts on this book, other books, book suggestions. What would you like to see, hear us read to you? CYSTPod.
What content do you like?
Yeah, cystpod@gmail.com is the email address. It'll get right to me, and I will read it, and we'll figure out where to go from there. So, anything else on this one, Mare?
No.
No? All right.
No.
Well, I have forgotten my locker combination again. So, until next time, this has been Classics You Slept Through.